Welcome back to Capital Account. So earlier we heard from CEO of Euro Pacific Capital, Peter Schiff, on free markets. So I wanted to talk to him about, in his model, if he thinks workers should be able to organize for better wages. Because to remind you, look at what wages have been like. In this chart, you can see that bottom line is the average wages of workers over about the last 30 years, and it is just stagnated. I mean, it's just a flat line. And that skyrocketing green line is what's happened to executive pay. It's exploded. Now, at the same time, private sector union membership has declined significantly. You can see there from 34% and 16% for men and women respectively, down to 8% and 6%. Now, the reasons behind that really depend on who you talk to. But as far as my conversation with Peter, I asked him about this, and he said, yeah, workers should be able to organize, but he believes government should stay out of it. And here's what he said.
If you own a business, it's your right to make decisions who you want to hire and who you don't want to hire. And if the unionized workers, if they don't like that, they're free to work someplace else, or they're free to start their own businesses. If they don't like the working conditions, if they don't like the wages of the company that they work for, it's a free country. Go start their own company. Nobody's stopping them.
But what if there aren't better options? I mean, right now we see that there's such a vast divide between rich and poor, and we see that unemployment is so high. So what if there just simply are no better options for a lot of people?
Well, I get that argument all the time, and people say, when I was down at the Occupy Wall Street protest, and somebody was saying, well, Walmart is exploiting people, it's giving them these low wages. And I said, well, then why don't they quit and they get a better job? And I said, well, there are no better jobs. Well, precisely, if the best job is the low wages that they're getting at Walmart, then Walmart is doing them a favor. Walmart is offering them a job that is better than any other job that they could get. Because if they could get a better job, they would quit and take it. But the fact that Walmart is providing them with their best alternative means that Walmart is doing them a service. And to say, hey, you're not paying enough, you have to pay more, well, maybe if you force them to pay more, they would pay nothing because the job wouldn't exist.
Yeah, but Peter, I mean, there's a whole issue that people have to eat and they have to be able to afford, the basic necessities of life, which is a separate conversation. But getting to what you're talking about, that this should be a level playing field, you also talk about socialized risks and how essentially Wall Street has had their risks socialized by the federal government, which is a problem that you've pointed out as well. So my question with that is the problem then exactly what Occupy Wall Street is saying, one of the main themes, money in politics, that Wall Street has influenced Washington so significantly with campaign contributions and lobbying, and that's the problem that needs to be ended.
Well, it is a problem, but it's not just Wall Street that is influencing Washington. Washington is selling its influence all around the country. And so the problem isn't Wall Street lobbying for government perks. The problem is the government being able to hand out those perks in exchange for money or help getting reelected. So my point with Occupy Wall Street is don't waste your time going after the recipients of the government benefits. Go after the government for making those benefits available. We have to start by reforming Washington. If we don't reform Washington, nothing is going to change. If we don't take power away from Washington, people are always going to lobby for that power to be used for their advantage.
So then do you argue that money should be taken out of politics, that people should not be able to contribute the amounts that they are able to into politics, corporations, and Wall Street? For example.
No, we have to take the power away from the politicians. That's what needs to happen. I'm not talking about limiting campaign contributions. In fact, I think the campaign finance rules that are in existence right now that's part of the problem. I ran for office, in the U.S. Senate, and the campaign finance laws really got in my way. I would have had a much easier time breaking into politics as a first-timer, as a businessman, if I didn't have to raise money based on the limitations that the government put on me. So in this case, it was the campaign finance laws that kept career politicians in office and prevented someone like me, who actually wanted to help the country, from getting a Senate seat. So I think we've done a lot more damage with these campaign finance laws. What we have to do is take away the power, and that's easy to do. We've got to repeal all these rules and regulations. We've got to get the government to follow the Constitution, to abide by the Constitution.
So then very quickly, Peter, because we're almost out of time, should they abolish the Federal Reserve? Because you are opposed to pretty much everything they do.
Yeah, well, I would like to phase them out. I think if we abolished them right away, we could replace it with something different. I think as a transition to eventually getting rid of the Federal Reserve, we should at least rein in their power and maybe restore the original mission. You know, when the Federal Reserve was originally established, Federal Reserve notes had to be backed 40% by gold bullion, and the Federal Reserve was not allowed to have any U.S. Treasuries on its balance sheet. You know, so I'd like to go back to that. I don't want the Federal Reserve to be an engine of debt monetization and inflation, which is what it is today. We need to go back to sound money, and that was the original goal of the Federal Reserve, was to provide sound money. It failed miserably, but, you know, we should at least try it again. But ultimately, I think the reason it failed is because you can't trust the central bank.
But we're out of time, but you are saying just yes or no, eventually phase it out?
I think we'd be better off without it, yes.
There you go. Peter Schiff, abolish the Fed. He's CEO and Chief Global Strategist for Euro Pacific Capital.